I was 36 when I found the message that shattered me. A single line glowing on my husband's phone last night was perfect. Can't wait to see you again. My stomach dropped, my hands went cold, and the world tilted sideways in that instant. For years, I had suspected something was wrong. The late nights, the sudden business trips, the way he turned his phone face down whenever I walked into the room. But suspicion is a cruel thing. You almost want to be proven wrong, because the truth is far more unbearable. His name was Ethan. We had been married for 12 years, built a home together, shared holidays, laughter, and dreams. I thought we were steady, if not blissful. But looking at that text, I realized steadiness had been a mask, a thin layer covering rot that had been spreading quietly underneath. I scrolled further. More messages, intimate, playful, careless in their arrogance. Her name appeared at last, Melissa. Young, bold, reckless enough to text a married man as though their affair were a romance novel. She wasn't just a fling, she was a chapter he had chosen to write while erasing mine. I sat in silence that night, staring at the walls of our bedroom. Rage boiled beneath my ribs, but beneath it was something deeper, a hollow ache that came from betrayal, from knowing that love had been replaced by lies. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw his phone across the room to demand answers, but instead I stayed quiet. Because anger burns fast, and I knew I needed something slower, sharper. The following week, life continued with its cruel normalcy. Ethan kissed me absent-mindedly before work, asked me if we were low on milk, complimented the new curtains as if nothing had changed. I played along, but inside I was dissecting every word, every gesture, searching for the man I thought I knew and finding only shadows. And then came the invitation that lit the match for my plan. His mother's birthday was approaching, and the family was gathering for a barbecue at her house. Ethan mentioned it casually over dinner like any other year. But this time, instead of dreading the forced smiles and family chatter, an idea slid into my mind with terrifying clarity. What if Melissa came too? The thought was insane at first. Invite his mistress to a family barbecue, to his mother's house no less. But the more I turned it over in my mind, the sharper it became. It wasn't just confrontation I wanted, it was revelation. I wanted his family to see with their own eyes who he really was. I wanted to shatter the picture of the perfect son, the devoted husband, the charming man they all adored. And I wanted to do it in a way that neither he nor she could prepare for. The plan began to take shape. I reached out to Melissa, cloaking my voice in warmth, pretending I didn't know. I told her I was organizing the barbecue, that I had heard so much about her from Ethan that I thought it was time she met the family. She hesitated, of course, suspicion flickering through her words. But pride is a dangerous thing, and Melissa was proud of her conquest. She wanted to be seen, wanted to step into the light of legitimacy. So eventually she agreed. The days leading up to the barbecue were a blur of rehearsed smiles and hidden fury. I shopped for groceries, marinated meats, baked my mother-in-law's favorite cake, all while Ethan kissed my cheek and checked his phone under the table. Every glance at him felt like swallowing glass, but I kept smiling. Because the real feast wasn't going to be on the table, it was going to be the truth served raw in front of everyone. The morning of the barbecue, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection. My face was calm, composed, even radiant. No one would see the storm inside me. That was the point. The power of revenge lies in control, in the ability to smile while the ground beneath your enemy's feet begins to crack. As guests arrived, laughter filled the backyard, the smell of grilled food mixing with the sweetness of blooming roses. Ethan was in his element. Charming his cousins, helping his father set up chairs, hugging his mother. He had no idea what was coming. And then, as I stood by the gate with a tray of drinks, I saw her. Melissa, walking toward me in a summer dress, her lips painted red, her smile wide with both nerves and arrogance. My heart thudded, but I steadied myself. I greeted her warmly, kissed her cheek like an old friend, and watched as she stepped into the circle of Ethan's family. And that's when the cracks began to spread. Melissa's arrival was like a stone dropped into calm water. The ripples spread quickly, quietly, until they touched everyone in the yard. At first, no one knew who she was. She smiled brightly, introduced herself as a friend, and Ethan's eyes widened in panic the moment he saw her standing by my side. For the first time in years, I watched him lose his composure. His confident grin faltered, his posture stiffened, and he nearly dropped the glass he was holding. I savored that moment. His mother, sweet and unsuspecting, welcomed Melissa, politely asking how she knew our family. Melissa hesitated, darting a glance at Ethan, who stood frozen across the lawn. I stepped in smoothly, rescuing them both with a smile that burned like fire on my lips. Melissa is a friend of Ethan's from work, I said, my tone light, my eyes never leaving his face. He swallowed hard, caught between relief and dread. The barbecue carried on with forced normalcy. The smell of burgers and ribs filled the air. Children darted between chairs and relatives chatted about vacations and promotions. But beneath the surface, tension thrummed like a violin string pulled too tight. Ethan avoided Melissa, keeping his distance, but his eyes flickered toward her constantly, as if begging her to stay quiet. Melissa, for her part, tried to play the role of a guest, laughing at jokes, sipping her drink, but her nerves betrayed her. She fiddled with her bracelet, her laugh too loud, her gaze too sharp when it landed on me. I moved through the gathering with practiced grace, serving drinks, complimenting outfits, chatting with cousins. On the outside, I was the perfect hostess, but inside I was savoring every crack in Ethan's mask. He was unraveling one bead of sweat at a time, and the family, though they didn't yet understand, was beginning to notice something strange. The moment I had been waiting for came during dinner. Plates clattered the long table filled with roasted corn, grilled chicken salads, and cake. Everyone gathered, glasses raised to toast Ethan's mother. I sat at the head of the table, Melissa directly across from Ethan. His face was pale, his smile brittle, and the space between them throbbed with secrets no one else could see. And then casually I opened the door. "So Melissa," I said brightly, as if making small talk. "Ethan speaks so highly of you. I'm glad you could finally join us." The table fell quiet. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Ethan's fork clattered against his plate. Melissa's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the grill outside. "What do you mean?" Ethan's mother asked slowly, her brows furrowed. "Ethan never mentioned—" Ethan cut in, his voice sharp, almost desperate. "She's just a colleague, Mom. Don't read into it." But his voice wavered. Everyone heard it. And Melissa, caught between pride and fear, couldn't help herself. She leaned forward, lips curving into a tight smile. "Well, we've spent quite a bit of time together," she said softly, her eyes locked on me. A collective gasp rippled through the table. His sister's hand flew to her mouth. His father's face hardened, suspicion dawning. Ethan's mother looked from me to her son, confusion clouding her features. Ethan stammered, reaching for his glass, but the words tangled in his throat. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to accuse. The silence did it for me. The weight of their stares, the sharp edges of the truth pressing against the carefully constructed lie, it was enough. I sat back in my chair, sipping my wine, my expression calm. Inside, my heart pounded, but I forced myself to hold steady. This was the moment I had orchestrated. Not in a private fight behind closed doors, not in whispered accusations he could deny. Here at his mother's table, surrounded by his family, the mask slipped, and the cracks spread wider. Ethan's mother was the first to speak, her voice low and trembling, laced with both confusion and disappointment. "Ethan, what is she talking about?" Her fork lay untouched on her plate, her eyes locked onto her son as if searching for the boy she thought she knew. Ethan tried to recover, forcing a smile that came out more like a grimace. "Mom, it's nothing. Melissa is exaggerating. We're just friends from work, that's all." But Melissa's pride betrayed her. Perhaps she had grown tired of being the secret, the shadow lurking behind closed doors. Or maybe she wanted to stake her claim in front of his family to force legitimacy onto their affair. Whatever her reason, her next words sliced through the night like a blade. "Friends," she said with a bitter laugh. "Is that what we are, Ethan? Because the last time I checked, friends don't spend weekends at hotels. Friends don't make promises about Paris." The table erupted. Gasps, murmurs, sharp intakes of breath. Ethan's sister pushed her chair back, staring at him as though he were a stranger. His father's face darkened with fury, the kind of disappointment that weighs heavier than anger. His mother pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes glistening with tears. Ethan shot up from his chair, his voice raised, panicked. Melissa, stop, not here. But it was too late. The words had been spoken, and the truth had landed squarely in the center of the table, impossible to ignore. The perfect son, the devoted husband, the charming man they all adored, it all crumbled in an instant. I stayed silent, letting the storm rage without lifting a finger. This was my revenge, not by screaming or throwing accusations, but by simply opening the door and letting them reveal themselves. Ethan's mother turned to me, then her voice breaking. Is it true? I looked at her steady and calm, even as my chest ached. Yes, I said softly. It's true. I found out months ago, and I thought you all deserved to know too. The silence that followed was heavier than any shouting could have been. His family stared at him, at Melissa, at the mess of lies spilled out onto their dinner plates. Ethan's face was pale. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting wildly as if searching for an escape. Melissa shifted uncomfortably, her earlier bravado shrinking under the weight of the glares around her. She reached for her glass, her hand trembling, but the wine sloshed onto the tablecloth. No one moved to help her. I rose slowly from my chair, my legs steady despite the storm inside me. Enjoy the rest of the evening, I said quietly, my eyes never leaving Ethan's. I think my part here is done. And then I walked away. Past the table, past the garden lights strung overhead, past the murmurs and gasps and furious whispers. My heart pounded, my throat burned, but I didn't falter. Because for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I wasn't carrying the weight of his secret anymore. I had laid it bare for all to see. Behind me, voices rose, his mother crying, his father demanding answers. Ethan begging for control he no longer had. Melissa's voice cracked, trying to defend herself, but no one was listening. Their chaos blended into the night, fading behind me as I stepped out the gate. The cool evening air hit my skin, and for the first time in months, I breathed deeply. Revenge didn't erase the betrayal, didn't undo the pain, but it gave me something back. Power. Control. The ability to walk away knowing I had exposed him for who he truly was, not just to me, but to everyone who once believed in him. In the days that followed, the fallout from that barbecue spread like wildfire. The family who once praised Ethan as the perfect son and husband now looked at him with disgust. His mother called me privately, her voice heavy with tears. I'm so sorry, dear. I raised him better than this. There was grief in her words, but also shame. She couldn't defend him, not after what she had seen with her own eyes. Ethan tried, of course. He showed up at our house late at night, pounding on the door, demanding that I fix this with his family. He begged. He yelled. He tried to shift the blame onto me. Why would you bring her there? Why would you humiliate us all like that? His voice cracked with desperation, as though I had betrayed him instead of the other way around. I didn't answer. I simply watched him rage, my silence louder than any words. For years I had carried his secrets, shielded him from the consequences of his choices. But not anymore. Now he was forced to carry them himself. Melissa, too, suffered her own downfall. She thought she had been stepping into legitimacy, into recognition. But what she got was exposure. The family despised her friends, whispered behind her back, and the illusion of her victory over me shattered completely. She had paraded herself at that barbecue, thinking she would be acknowledged as his partner. Instead, she left as the woman who destroyed a marriage in front of everyone's eyes. The truth has a way of spreading without help. Soon neighbors, friends, and colleagues knew. The man who once walked into rooms with his head high now couldn't meet anyone's gaze. His colleagues whispered behind his back. His boss, who had been at the barbecue himself, demoted him quietly weeks later, citing professionalism concerns. Ethan had thought his secret life could stay compartmentalized. But I had torn down the walls, and now he was buried beneath the rubble. Meanwhile, I began to rebuild. At first, the silence in our home felt unbearable. His absence was a gaping wound, and even though I knew I was better without him, I still grieved. Betrayal isn't clean. It leaves scars, questions, moments of doubt, where you wonder if you were ever truly loved. But slowly, I learned to sit with that pain without letting it consume me. I filled the space with music, with dinners, with friends, with long walks where I let the fresh air clear my mind. The divorce process started soon after. Ethan tried to delay it, hoping for reconciliation, but I was resolute. There was no going back. Not after everything. At the first hearing, when the judge asked if the marriage was irretrievably broken, I said yes with a clarity that surprised even me. Ethan looked at me, his eyes hollow, but I didn't flinch. The woman who had been silenced, humiliated, betrayed, that woman was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who had faced the fire and walked through it, someone who finally understood her worth. Months later, I found myself standing on the porch of a new apartment, keys in hand, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. I thought of the girl I had been when I married Ethan, so full of hope, so desperate to build a perfect life. I thought of the woman who discovered his betrayal broken and lost. And I thought of the person I had become, now scarred, yes, but free. Revenge had been my path to survival, but healing was my destination. And as I stepped into that new space, I realized I was no longer defined by what he had done to me. I was defined by how I had risen after. So if you've ever been betrayed, if you've ever sat in silence wondering how you'll survive the weight of someone else's choices, hear me when I say this. You are stronger than you think. Betrayal is not the end. It's the beginning of your rebirth. If my story resonated with you, if you've walked through fire and found yourself on the other side, I'd love to hear from you. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs courage, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and truth. And leave a comment, tell me how you rose from your ashes.